All right, this session is about the sponsoring queue. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's a collection of patches, bugs, branches, people who don't have upload rights yet. They want to get those changes reviewed from existing developers who then can upload the changes for them. This happens a couple of times until people feel more confident in their skills, and that's when most of them apply for upload rights. That's how it works today.
In theory, anyway.
In theory, yes. This has become, or always been, some kind of bottleneck. At times we've dealt better with it, and at times it was really, really bad. I can give you a link to the current report about it. It aggregates bug reports and... Right. Thank you, Benjamin.
See, that's not so bad. This is one of our better days.
And if you scroll down the report, you can see that we're doing very well when it comes to universe and multiverse things. The biggest blogger is stuff in main. So what we did in the past was we improved the documentation. We were thinking about how do we best deal with, for example, stuff that should be forwarded upstream, or how do we get it off the list, basically. If you feel this is wrong, shouldn't be doing this, get it off the list. It's not what we're doing. So we improved documentation. We were thinking about tools. That's something we didn't explore enough yet, I think. And also within Canonical, every platform developer tries to spend 1 hour per week on reviewing changes. I think the main problem I can see is that we don't have a culture of reviewing.
Oh, we do very heavily, or many of us do very heavily.
No, I don't think that's the case.
He's not talking about specific people. He is talking about the culture across the whole basis.
No, but I think that what Benjamin raises is very critical, that one of the things that we spent a lot of time doing with the remote community was creating a culture of review. And we tend to keep that for unseeded packages. For the packages that belong to seeds, I think that hasn't always been the case. And I think it's unfair to say, a general, we don't have a culture of reviewing. I think it's explicit to say certain subsets of us are not participating in a culture of reviewing.
I think core dev is one of those subsets.
Yes.
I think you're taking what he's saying too literally. The fact that we've had this problem for the last, well, forever, I think means that we have a culture, but there are definitely areas of the community that perform very well in this area.
Is it forever, or has it gotten worse?
It's better than it has been.
I don't think we're doing any worse, but I think
it's better right now than it has been.
I
mean, if you look at it around feature freeze or something like that, it's usually hundreds of sponsorship.
But queue length is only a proxy measure. I mean, what you actually care about is the wait time in a queue. Do you have any idea what it is now? And do you have any idea?
Actually, I question a queue being the right structure for this at all. I think actually perhaps one of the fundamental problems here is the disconnect that we have between the people doing the sponsoring and the people who need sponsorship. Lacking that, having this impersonal queue in the middle. And I recognize that there are a lot of people who do go out there and they make a relationship with somebody, but just having that as a work queue, I mean, there are people on the other side of that. That's not just a number and those are people who need help getting into the
I take your point. I agree very much with your point. On the other hand, if you have like a bunch of excess work and only a limited number of people to process it, then ultimately, we'll end up with a queue.
Why we had a queue.
There are lots of projects.
And you can that's my question.
Can Tony answer Jonah's, Jonah 2's? It's the question of how long are people waiting?
A long time.
Way too long.
What's a long time?
Months.
In some cases, did it used to be less than months?
They created 2006.
It really depends what it is.
That's when the bug was open.
That's the bug, yeah.
Okay.
If you have a good friend, it might be quick.
Or it can only be an asshole on RC.
If it's a simple patch. But in some cases where packages nobody is really interested in, sometimes we have huge patches that nobody wants to make a judgment on, and they stay there.
If nobody is interested in a package, I have to wonder why it's seeded.
Yeah, and also sometimes
because it's something else depends on it.
Exactly.
Somebody should be interested.
Yeah, sometimes as a sponsor you would would then take on the responsibility of either doing all the forwarding to upstream yourself or going back and working out the forwarding with the submitter. So it's quite a lot of work actually. So it's not just taking the patch, applying it, and forgetting about it. So you could do this for a little while, but you would just contribute to piling up our delta. So the main point of sponsoring is to work out with the submitter of the patch how to do it, what to do with the patch properly, like working with the real upstream, getting it there, bringing it to the format that upstream likes, working out the curves and so on.
Yeah, I guess
so we don't just want to drive this queue to zero, we want to do the right thing with these changes.
Yeah, I don't think this is a tools problem or a process problem, but a motivation problem.
And the time problem too. So usually BG callers, they've got so much to do on their hands that
so one observation from my Launchpad days. We instituted within the teams an on-call reviewer whose sole purpose for that entire day was to review other people's stuff. Now, at first glance, you think to yourself, well, that's going to kill my own productivity because I'm spending 20% of my time doing no coding, right? I'm not doing anything but looking at other people's stuff.
You're unblocking a whole bunch.
But the difference was that the team's productivity shot through the roof because it was unblocking, progress in your entire team. So part of it is sort of your own mentality to think, I'm not here just for my own productivity. I'm here for everybody else as well, and that makes a big difference.
And in addition to that, quality, it has a huge impact on quality, like small bugs you just don't spot when you just upload something. And the other one is that you share knowledge.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, we have one person who takes care of one package. Like, I don't know. But they'll go if he gets hit by the bus tomorrow, who's going to take care of GCC?
Well,
for example,
that's no longer the perfect example, but yeah.
How many core devs are there who are employed by Canonical and work on user engineering?
Most of them.
Most?
I can look it up for you.
Like approximately. Closer to 10 or closer to 100?
50.
About
50.
Okay, so that's more than one person per day per month.
I know, but this is not a canonical problem. This is an emergent problem.
So we don't actually care. And it's something to really heavily stress is that it is only a problem with packages that are ending up in Cs. And it would be interesting, and something Benjamin didn't tell us, is to know how many of those 75 packages that aren't being well dealt with are packages that are in core, and how many are outside of core.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 15 branches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Oh wait, there's actually a summary at the bottom, isn't there? Yes, there's 47 out of 74 are in core.
Okay.
Some of those overlap with desktop core and kernel as well, I think.
Martin, you wanted to say something?
You don't make it easy. Martin P.
Actually, just swap places. I think something like the on-call thing has worked very well with the Zalo and for patch pilot, but for staff developers, it's actually much more efficient to spend a day doing just reviews because you're not going to switching mindset all the time. But suggesting that as a solution implies that the reason things are stalling is because people aren't getting around to reviewing / sponsoring again. I just want to work out if that is.
It's also, frankly, kind of a top-down corporate solution, which there are lots of people who work on Ubuntu who can't spend a full day.
More volume, please.
But the interesting thing I think in Bizarre's patch pilot program is that it's not the same as on-call reviewer. It's someone who is there to enable people to get their code all the way through to the end and to do whatever it takes to do that. So sometimes it's picking up a patch from a community member who no longer has time and completing it. And this is something I found very useful when I was spending a lot of time on the sponsorship queue in terms of actually making a difference to the numbers, because I wouldn't just go through the queue and go, no, okay, on a certain day. I would just pick a bunch of bugs, reply to those, and then when it came back, deal with those bugs, not pick up new ones. So
So I
drive
would-
those ones to completion.
I would suggest that the one thing that I think would be useful is if we could have some way of distinguishing, you look at the sponsorship queue and there's a whole range of bugs on there. There are things that are clearly not ready to be uploaded. There are things that are ready, that are completely sane and just need somebody with the proper permissions. And if we could have a better way of categorizing those different types of bugs.
I don't think we can easily tell because a lot of times a new bug might be perfect, or an old bug that's gone through 10 iterations is still not acceptable.
Sure, I don't disagree with that.
Well, I think that these statistics are very interesting because they identify the specific areas, and it looks like, although desktop has a fair number, most of the flavors are actually pretty good, and our problem is really with our core. That we have historically had a lot of core devs who actually are flavor devs because we didn't have that semantic distinction before. And I don't know how many we have that actually focus on that core bit.
So just, so I just want to answer the thing Nat said before, that it's kind of corporate. When we set this up, people did have that concern. I distinguished two parts of it. One is we have this thing, which we as a project do, which is we go through the queue and we really help people get their changes in. If necessary, we write, if they need a test and they don't have a test and they don't seem like they can cross that, then we will write the test and we'll get their thing in. We want to give people a really good experience. That's 80% of the project. Then on top of that, we say now, as a manager at Canonical, we can allocate people's time. We're going to allocate one person every workday to execute this process. But that's it. Anybody can do it.
And I really like the first part of it, like the idea of having that as as a project value that you really help get those contributions in. Absolutely agree. The second part, actually, we tried that in Canonical for Ubuntu, and it didn't work.
How so? What did we try?
It pains me to have you ask that question. But we said that platform engineers should spend 1 hour.
Right, so that's what we tried. We didn't try it. So we had this totally vague thing, no one was on the hook at any certain time.
Yeah.
We did a report every week that we circulated to engineering
Very, sounds very different.
1 hour? Yeah, 1 hour.
Well, 1 hour at the time of your choosing.
Well, that's
like, you're not accountable
1 hour is not
to anyone
enough.
at a certain
It's
time.
plenty to do a couple.
So think about, I mean, it's a reasonable question, but I think doing it with your time is, I think our experience shows it's better. The pilot for us is in the IMC topic. They, if something's getting stale, you can say, hey, Spirit, you're a pilot, why don't you have a look at the queue? We've tried to establish that at the end of the week they send a mail where they can celebrate that they got the queue down to 4 patches or whatever.
I think I agree with you. I think it seems like as a corporation that's partnering to support the project, it seems like reasonable support.
Can you speak up a bit?
Oh, sure. It just seems like reasonable support for a corporate partner of a community project to provide to the community.
I agree, which is why
here's reliable
made that
manpower.
on behalf of Canonical.
What?
We haven't upheld.
We have not right, but I think what we've been trying has not been working. I think it's distinctly different than what Martin P. has been discussing. So
I agree, and I'm perfectly happy to change the role to be more like that. But honestly, I think the problem is not the nature of the role, but actually getting those hours put in.
well, I think that is also a problem that we have knobs and dials that we can.
So we talked about this. There's part of the issue here with the hour a week is the fact that people are so busy with their other stuff that I think they forget about it in the same way. But it's not something you'd want to add at the strategic level because it's like you don't have bug fixing at a strategic level. You don't say, we're going to assign bug fixing time to you. And I think it gets deprioritized because basically the staff have never been on the hook for it.
So I think people should subtract that. So I think one reasonable solution would be say, I'm just proposing it, to adopt this method and say, like, if you're a Ubuntu developer who works for Canonical, you're going to be assigned a day, a little less than once a month, once every couple of months, where you're going to be on the hook for here. And by the way, you need to sign up for fewer work items because this is going to take your time. And we're going to give up some features in the short term for probably significant benefits, like going forward. Look at the cost benefits of like
more contributors.
Yes, I think
I have a concern about this implementation, and I think it's critical that you don't implement it that way. The problem is that we have, if we look at the package sets, a lot in main, but 47 in core. Now, the set of people who deal with core is significantly smaller than the set of people who happen to be core dev. And I suspect a number of people who consider them core dev would not consider themselves qualified to deal with the packages that are in that core set.
So let me address that specifically, and it may be different because the breadth of expertise is so much larger, but this was an issue with Launchpad, because Launchpad's a big, complex piece of software that people were expertise in a small sliver of that and did not feel qualified to review stuff outside of that. And we made a specific decision that people could review and should review outside of their expertise. And it really had a lot of benefit. And there was a lot of pushback with that because people would say, I don't really know anything about Soyuz. I can't review any of that stuff.
Yes.
But the reality is, if you have a good sensibility about coding in general, and you take the right approach to reviews, right? These are Kiko's laws of reviewing. Should be fast, should be fun, and ask a lot of questions. And so if you see something that you don't understand because you're not an expert in that, ask a question and move on. And what will happen is you will learn, the developer will learn, and you start to broaden your horizons.
I think it would also be useful to, I'm not saying that we particularly do this now, but just as a corollary to what Barry was saying, that we shouldn't hold the sponsor ultimately responsible for the content of the patch which they
No, we should hold.
If you upload something which you reviewed in good faith and you missed something and it caused a bug, then you shouldn't be. Because that certainly stops you wanting to review things.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but there's a flip side to that too. Hang on. That person is empowered to do the upload.
Right.
Yeah? And that upload, although they didn't write the patch, they're still responsible if it breaks. So if someone is a drive-by contributor and says, here's my dev diff, yeah, just say it explodes in their face, the drive-by contributor will say, bad luck. Who fixes it then?
No. A bunch of developers have to fix it, but I'm saying that they shouldn't be criticised for missing something which.
Well, no one should.
Like if it's a patch which removes the review directory, then yeah, they should be called that in review. But
But what I'm saying is the accountability needs to be there, because if you review and upload something and it does go bang in a bad way, someone needs to be reactive to fixing that.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the reviewer.
Yes, they should be responsible for their changes.
But they shouldn't get dinged by it, and people
we shouldn't assume perfection in reviews.
No.
So you are responsible, but not be critics. You shouldn't be
Right.
criticized.
Yeah.
I feel like we're conflating two things here. I think there are lots of ways in which we can improve the way that we do sponsoring, which is what most of this conversation needs to be about. But the fact is that not enough sponsorship is getting done.
Yeah.
It's not a quality problem, it's a quantity problem.
But there's also, there's only a small number of people we're talking about who aren't doing it. Because if you look at all the other main flavors, there are 7 patches in 7.
I don't think
the
the problems.
I'm not sure that's particularly.
But didn't we just propose like a 4 times increase in like people's time spent sponsoring?
No, hang on. I mean, people saying that there's not many in the queue, but I don't know if things have changed significantly. But when I was contributing, and I had a dev diff that was baking for 6 months or so, it actually demotivated me. I couldn't even touch it. And what got me back into it was making a relationship with people who could sponsor my work and getting them to upload it. And that's what got me back into it.
I was just about to say, I think that the challenge here is that the experience that the person who is asking for their work to be sponsored, the experience that they get and the experience that the person who's doing the sponsorship work has are 2 very different things. One is significantly more personal than the other one. So when you work on something you're excited about contributing to Ubuntu, and then you have a real live Ubuntu developer reviews your work, and you start building a personal relationship with that person, I think it's a valuable experience. But then from the other side of the field, Ubuntu developers are generally pretty busy, and the sponsorship queue can feel like a set of things that they like to do, but they're so busy with other stuff. To me, the problem we've got right here is that this is completely depersonal experience. The way we should be thinking about this... Just one second. The way I think we should be thinking about this is, in my mind, and this may be naive, but the way open source works elsewhere is, you start hacking on a project and you get to know a developer, and that developer does commits the work, and then you go and do some other work, and that developer will be like, oh great, you're doing this again. There's a continuation of the relationship, and then they're more motivated to review your work as well. I think that's what we're talking about.
So that's specifically what we created the sponsors queue not to do.
Okay, so I said a large part recently, the point of reviews is not to keep bad code out of the product. The point of reviews is to develop your contributors and bring more contributors into the product. People get very worried that we'll get bad code in, but the bulk of, well, Ubuntu is special with upstreams, but the bulk of code is written by code developers. On the emotional thing, John Bacon said, if you tell somebody, you should really add a test for this, or you have a typo here, or whatever, please fix it. Okay. If you wait 5 months and then tell them, the typo, please go and fix it. What kind of experience is that? The thing I originally had my hand up for was, is this strategic or not? I mean, is getting contributions strategic or not? Just decide about that. And I think it's clearly important.
That's the side of it, strategic.
It should be a core value that contributing to Ubuntu is easy and fun. And to do that, you have to do the reviews properly. The other thing is, I mean, you're either going to do these reviews or not. If it takes an hour to review a particular patch, waiting 4 months and then spending an hour on it is not actually any easier, and it makes the benefit of that review much, much worse.
I think that's why we need to develop, what we need is the sponsorship queue to me feels like you could have...
So this is why...
Was there two with their hand up?
Sorry, just 1 second, I'll be real quick. I think you could have 5 different bug fixes that you've worked on, reviewed by 5 different people, and you might have a very small experience with each of them. I think the optimal position would be that you go on a journey with one person, and that person is more of a mentor. And we've talked about this in the past, and I think that in many ways that may mean that we're limited by the mentors, so we can only take so many people into the community, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because each person has a more enjoyable experience, a more personal experience.
There is actually a limit on our capacity, right? We just don't know what it is.
Exactly.
This grows our capacity.
Well, that's the thing. It feels like a limit. Sorry. Go ahead.
It's not really on the mental point to go back. Okay. So I would be interested in trying an experiment to reduce the size of the sponsor, or to improve the response time of sponsor requests by increasing the number of sponsor requests, basically, by making Ubuntu developers spend at least part of their time living the sponsorship queue from the other side.
Yeah.
Yes, to increase the amount of review done, and allowing other people to review core developers' code, because that allows them to get to learn and to play the other role, so that they can see some of the difficulties that we have in reviewing that.
So we put in a policy like every upload is reviewed?
Yes.
There's no way. And I mean, I agree that would be fantastic, but there's no way that could actually work in practice.
Why? Lots of projects do that. What is your concern?
I don't see us having the capacity to handle that volume of review.
No, what is it? I think the problem we have is much bigger, and that's why I said we don't have a culture of reviewing yet. Hang on. There's a lot of things we don't know. For example, we know that there's some problems in distributed development somewhere. We know some reviewing patches is hard sometimes, but we don't have rules for something like, if a review is much easier if you can say, okay, I put this patch upstream already. In a lot of cases this hasn't happened yet, but we don't have the culture of talking about what speeds up the review process, what makes it easier. And I think that an experiment like that would help us build the tools, build the processes, and build the knowledge as a team.
I'm not saying that we should have the rule necessarily. I would like it that all code must be reviewed, but at least have it be part of the work that a lot of us do to say, I'm doing an upload, let me see if I can get it reviewed. And actually just talking about what process we'd like to go through to get that review, because I don't think that submitting to a queue and then waiting is particularly a good way to go about doing that, because that's a handoff which stops me from getting to where I want to be.
Yeah. So one other thought, which I want to place out there, is that it's not necessary that someone who has upload rights, or the people who have upload rights, are the only people who can review patches.
Yes.
Right? I only can upload a handful of packages. Hopefully that will change over time.
Right.
But one of the ways that, for example, I could build my own credibility is by reviewing stuff that I don't have the rights to upload.
Absolutely
But
agreed.
then when somebody who does have the rights to upload looks at that review, because it's all in the merge proposal, right? It's all in the merge proposal. They can say, you know what? I don't trust Barry with any PHP stuff. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So I'm going to have to look at it myself. Or they can say, well, it's Perl, so I totally trust Barry for all of his reviews. And then they can say, okay, well, it's been reviewed. It looks like somebody with some expertise has looked at it and feels good about it. I don't really have to do much more than just do the upload.
But that's how Ubuntu works, right? Is that when you want to do a project, you say, I'd like to do something, you usually go and talk to someone specifically. You don't put it into a
And that's broken.
Sorry.
My sort of response to James' suggestion of like this trial. So I guess in doing certain parts of the release, like when we freeze or when you want to upload an SRU, you already do have this experience.
Yes.
So you upload something and then it's just stuck in some queue. Of course, in this case, the number of reviewers is significantly smaller, but at least it gives you the idea that you want to push in the bug fix urgently, and then you have to wait for a week or 3 days.
Honestly, the SRU queue is an interesting point to bring up, because I think that the SRU queue has gotten substantially better in the last release or two, especially compared against to the full-on release queue.
You mean while
which is
queues
probably
on rotation?
no, absolutely. I mean, Martin handles like all of my SRUs. There's not a small number of them.
Yeah, but for example, I've been waiting for 1.5 weeks to get my UDS patch reviewed. So I feel the pain. But,
but I mean, I think that the SRU is an interesting sort of counter to the kind of general main queue, because I might wait for, weeks of bugging somebody on IRC to get a patch uploaded into main, but I mean, once I can get it into there, if it's an SRU or something like that, that actually gets looked at at a relatively fast time frame, which I think is probably, you schedule time to deal with SRUs, right?
yeah, lots of them.
So we already have an example within in the Ubuntu community, as Martin brings up. At release time, we freeze, we review every upload, and there are people on hand to review at short notice on demand. So we already have this for part of the site, so it's more just an extension of that.
Probably when you
I'm actually going to talk about something else, but
Yeah,
if you want to make a later point, come back
So
to me.
a very quick related point.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll ever solve this unless we're eating our own dog food.
Mm.
Until we feel the pain ourselves, we're not. We have no empathy for the people that are out there, and so we're not going to make it better. Once we are feeling the pain and eating our own dog food, then we're gonna innovate on solutions to this problem. And we may not get it right the first time, but we will.
You raised the hand too?
I did. So the one thing that I can bring to this discussion and solutions here is resource allocation. So I have some knobs and dials there. So it's obvious to me that and I intended, so I set up 5 things that I want us to focus on, and one of those is contributions. Wrote it on my blog today. It's there's 5 things I want us to focus on in Humanity. This is one of those things. That means fewer work items. People are going to come ask for features, and one of the things that we're going to trade off features is this. So I've heard 2 ways, given if I can free up some set of resources, I've heard 2 ways that those can be allocated. One of them is a time-based one. We can have a schedule where every weekday there's somebody who is doing reviews, and we'll have some interesting effects, they'll be reviewing things outside their area of expertise, which, from what I heard, potentially interesting benefits there. But that would be a significant increase in the amount of time. If you think 1 hour a week, that's 4 hours a month. If we had everyone on hook 1 day a month, that would be doubling, assuming they only worked an 8-hour day. So and maybe we could do even more there. So that's one way of doing it, and that's what I'll call the BZR method. I think Jonah was alluding to another method where you don't allocate people with time, but you allocate people to people. And I think that's something that we should, I think that could have some benefits too, because the people that I know in Ubuntu, like, often work harder for people than they do for processes.
So the reason that we set up the sponsorship queue was specifically to break the people-to-people relationship that we used to have. We had a process by which people were putting together, I want this patch uploaded, and we ended up with about 5 people who were uploading patches, and it was all happening visibly in Ubuntu Motive, because the sponsorship queue was originally just for Universe. And those 5 people would then, everyone else would talk to them to get it, and they would quickly become overloaded. We set up the queue to say, okay, put something in the queue, and when we set up the queue, we would go and grab things and talk to people and build those relationships actively while we were using the queue.
Fair enough, but there's only 5 people doing it, like,
no,
that is something I can
that was the problem. That problem went away when we had the queue, and we got so that most of the Motu were doing at least a little bit, and people were building fairly broad spread relationships, and that was working quite well. And I think we should maintain that, because I worry if we go and make the same mistakes we mainly made in Motu when we started doing that, we'll end up no better than we are today.
Thank you. So another way of doing it would be allocating people to packages, right?
Yeah.
So we have, when we have this thing with merges, right? If you touch a package, you're expected to do the next merge if one comes along before the input freeze. Yes?
Yeah.
And by and large, this happens. This actually happens. So I wonder if we could do something similar for sponsoring, right? So you add a column to the sponsoring overview, last uploader of this package. If you are the last uploader, you are expected to have
How about your upload gets rejected if there are outstanding patches? I like that. I like that a lot.
Or something like that, or it could just be a many-to-one relationship, like, you know, because one package might only need one person, but other packages may need several people, so that we reduce the time. But we definitely, I'd like to see us measuring, like on a weekly basis, how long that wait time is. I'd like us to be driving that to, you know, as close to 0 as possible.
We need to have that. Can we revert that? Sorry?
Sure. With measuring things,
Measuring over time.
Like every day, then you just say, what's the average wait time in this queue?
Right.
Yeah, basically things are moving out of the queue.
That makes it easier.
I would
You like that?
love to be able to spend some time learning that.
Yeah. So,
Okay, so one thing that it occurs to me is, I think possibly a fairly core issue to the sponsorship queue as it exists right now, is that, and as opposed to the personal relationships of yesteryear, is that, like, when I post something to the sponsorship queue, or actually more importantly, when I'm looking through the sponsorship queue, it's not obvious that I can really get help from the person who's posting the patch, whereas, like, I know that I don't know that I can reach them on IRC, maybe the time zones are different, or who knows what's going on.
Do you try? If you don't try,
no, I agree.
Failure on your part.
Sure, fine, I buy that. But I mean, I feel like when I'm on the other hand and posting something to the sponsorship queue, my concern, I think, in a lot of cases is that I'm not going to get any attention for my patch, because you know, if you look at the patch and you can't understand immediately what's going on, that's discouraging to try and process it. So that's why I usually end up going, I think, to IRC to ask for help, is because I know that if somebody's looking at it right then, they're more likely, if I know that, if they know that I'm there and I know that they're there, and we both know that we're interested, that creates it more likely for somebody to actually follow the patch through.
Following on from that, I think that what we've got right now is we've got a process that's not working, so what people are doing is they're using the personal connections that they've got to bypass that process. And to me, what we want to be doing, I think Ian was talking, a lot of this was related, is in many ways what we're doing now is we're figuring out the best way in which we can visualize work to be reviewed. And what we should be doing is visualizing the best way in which people can be connected to other people. Now, one way of doing that is going to be packages, and what I think would be interesting for us to do maybe is to instead of having a sponsorship queue, maybe trial this for a release, is to basically say, okay, here's a big list of people who maintain certain packages. Because there's one thing a new developer knows, is they know what package they're working on. And so if there's a way in which they can find somebody who has maybe said, I'd be interested in helping to sponsor,
Well, change that, right?
then yeah, but if there's a way in which we can make that really visible to them, so they can say, so, you know, I decide I want to fix a bug in empathy, and then I find that, let's say, Ken Van Dyne is working on empathy, and then if I contact him personally, Ken will probably get a kick out of the fact that there's someone who wants to contribute something to empathy, and I think that will bolster that personal relationship with the teams. I think that's the thing we need to fix. We need to build those.
I think that's good.
But does the person at local scale?
So
If it doesn't, then we don't have the resources anyway.
I was just going to say something like, you know, I'm kind of starting down the path of becoming a Ubuntu. I work for Canonical, but I decided that as part of a personal goal, I'd like to contribute to Ubuntu the project. And I'm trying to say to myself, okay, like I'm a relatively savvy person. I can go read wiki pages, I can go find existing processes and try and be a good citizen and try and follow along with that. And I, you know, just start with the Ubuntu wiki page and try and do that. And to me, it's kind of an okay process. You know, it says, in order to get your, you know, as far as the technical part of fixing an FTPS or whatever, that's very, very simple. Like I generate the patch, I know how to do that. And then it says like, go subscribe to Ubuntu sponsors and the Launchpad bug. And then from that point on, it was a very opaque process. Like it was very mysterious how things got fixed. And you know, I submitted one patch, and I got some feedback on IRC because I happened to be on, and we happened to be in the same time zone, and it was great. And that was basically what I had a couple learning experiences. But then, you know, then I submitted another patch, applied, you know, got the other thing fixed the second time around, and then heard nothing back. But then, like 3 days later, it was just magically fixed released. So it's just a very strange process. There's no visible acts. There's nothing like that. So I'm just saying, as a new contributor, it's just very, very strange. Like there's no feedback. It's like you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing.
It's a machine.
So I think one example which might be illustrative going forward is the desktop team, which does the personal thing, but on more of a team level. So the IRC family is very active with people saying, I've got this patch, can someone review it? And then someone who's an uploader for the desktop team will then sponsor that patch soon afterwards because they're already helpful. And this has been very fruitful. We have got a lot of outstanding developers through this, such as Didier, Ian. I think you were through this as well. So that could be a useful way to break this down, because it's not one person to one person who can quickly get out of balance.
Right. This is where we have something which is more like the Debian team model, right? It's kind of, and I think this is the best way of working in Debian, and also when we replicate this in Ubuntu, it becomes the best way to work here as well.
Yeah, sure. Just two things. One is having to ask an IRC or whatever to get a review is perfectly normal in a healthy thing with fast review. Like, it's just a common thing. So don't consider that a point of failure. Secondly, we've got 8 minutes and no actions.
Yes. So I think we mentioned three options. One of them was dog fooding. Another one was resource allocation. However, it works on just saying
that can be combined with dog fooding.
Right.
Interesting approach.
And the third one was making it more personal, making it easier to find out who's working on what, and then getting the people together.
Kill the queue.
My personal gut feeling is that it's not 3 separate options, but that we should explore all 3 of them.
I think we should adopt the BZR method for the time being, because there's a success network there, and then we can like have people, have somebody on point, probably 2 people on point each and every day.
So why don't we think of a way, you can maybe schedule another session about providing this way of connecting people, and then trial it in Natty, and at the next UDS see how we got on. Because if we see an increase in contributions, then it may be something we want to consider instead of...
When we profile or when we pilot that, could we pilot that specifically in the seeded packages where we're having problems?
We could just do it as a special case of doing it for everything.
No, but I don't have a problem with doing that, but I want to make sure we focus on the area where we're specifically feeling pain. Where we're doing well, I don't necessarily want to cripple whatever is working well, and I don't want to investigate it too much right now.
I wanted to say, part of the benefit of the queue is that you don't have to interrupt somebody's workflow. So that if it's not critical to get Imagine at the moment, and especially core devs who are usually pretty busy people, that's one of the benefits of actually having a queue.
Yeah, but this approach would designate people to be purely interruptible for a day at a time, so that you're not interrupting them, but they're to be interrupted.
I just want to address this concern that we're replacing the thing, because the Zala patch pilot process is entirely supplementary, not exclusionary. If anyone who's not Power wants to do a review, that's great. If anyone who's not a core team member or not canonical staff wants to do a review, that's great. And it only encourages that because people they see it happen, they see it's fun and productive.
So should we? So are we supposed to try and find sponsors for patches and stuff? Because one thing I was trying not to do is I was trying not to abuse relationships I already had elsewhere. And I was trying to this is what I should be doing. As if I was brand new to the community and I didn't know anybody, I was trying to follow that process.
I'd like to recommend that we have this additional session. We can talk through things like that. Like how do we? Ideally, the way I'm thinking is we have a list of people, or you express your interest in a particular package, and then the name that you find is somebody who would be amenable to the concept of sponsorship. So we may need to figure out a way of people volunteering their time or whatever it might be, but we can maybe flesh that out in that next session.
One easy way to do it is to add the last uploader field for the sponsors.
Do we have to?
Yeah.
Well, to go one small step on the way.
Hang on, don't forget the last uploader could have been a sponsoree.
Yeah, we can figure out the details.
On the side.
We can figure out
in the next session.
But do we have any immediate action items?
Yeah, I feel like
somebody
that I brought up on IRC.
I think that we should use Ubuntu developer.
Okay.
That's what it's for.
Okay. No, I'd like someone to come up with a straw man proposal, like a schedule for people who are suitable for being reviewers, who work on the Ubuntu platform team. And I think probably like 2 people at a time. I think if every
And
day.
we already have a wiki page with a grid that does exactly that.
Yes.
So is
Yes.
the idea that
It
always be
exists,
someone?
but there were like 5 people who
Exactly.
themselves.
So the problem is not a lot of tooling or structure.
Well, time zone, I think it would be nice if we pick people who are like spread in time zones a bit, to like spread it up a bit. What do you, so late, I'd like to give you a chance to just like, answer. So what do you think about this idea?
You would work if people feel like they have the confidence to do anything.
I think that's our main cultural blocker, that a lot of things that we have in the areas where we have issues are that people feel that somebody maintains that.
Yeah.
And most people Ubuntu, we stand behind, Ubuntu has no maintainers. And especially in core, we tend to talk about, oh, let's go talk to so-and-so because it's this. And I think that's our main issue.
Well, if people are empowered to ship the patches to this maintainer.
I think the problem we have is that it's not bad enough yet. That we don't have a good solution for dealing with it. Because
dealing with what?
Dealing with code review, dealing with doing it, like the tools, the process, the instructions we give people to write something. Usually it's easy if you have a friend, like you just talk to them. But what James suggested was if we all would feel the pain, if we all were made to use it for a given time, maybe it's just an experiment for a week or two.
So
there are many archive quality reasons we should just keep it on all the time. So
I think that's a worthwhile experiment to enter into. But meanwhile, I'm just as a manager, like here's a team that has something that they've solved this problem in a certain way. It's less of an experiment to like clone that and tinker with it. So I'm a little bit more inclined to just like talk a little bit more with the BZR team, talk with Delaney and see what he thinks, talk with Barry and make sure.
But I think that's where we would get the feedback from.
So
if we would actively make use of it.
Okay, that's fair. But
I think
also
he's
be really
volunteering to take an action to do something.
What I am? Yeah, I took an action to task the community team. But yeah.
It's funny, but actually passing the buck around like that is why we're in this mess now. We actually tried to solve it exactly this way.
How did we try to solve
it? We said we're going to task the canonical Ubuntu platform team with solving this problem.
No, we didn't.
We did, I did, and I can accept that, it's my failure as a manager to have not made that happen and actually help everyone.
Right, so I don't.
But the fact remains, it didn't happen.
Okay, so I have an action item to cause to come into being, a straw man proposal for a schedule for people who are.
That already exists. That's not sufficient.
You have a schedule that has like every day, there's 2 people.
There's already a Vanguard style approach to people being in a channel where people can go and form a review. Like Colin Watson
It would be better if it was public, right? So the topic of Ubuntu Develop on
Yeah.
call for sponsor
That
review
doesn't
now
sound
is X
like
and
what
Y.
I'm talking about. Like, so first of all, everyone needs to do it, not just Colin. It's like everyone.
No, Colin's the person who signed up on the table, though. And the point was, when the instruction went out to tell everybody to do it, only Colin complied.
Yeah, so there's a difference between, so I'm saying, well, we will sign people up and then they can.
Yeah, I think we're talking across purposes. I mean, I think.
So this is.
Oh, sorry. I apologize, James.
Oh. Right, okay. So we should count how many people that we have on Ubuntu engineering that can be in those boxes and put them in those boxes.
Yes.
And then they can go and spread them, change them around if they want. I think there should probably be 2 people in each of those boxes.
I mean, the situations are different. I know I can have somebody start talking to me, and then the thing I need to do at 10 o'clock is, you know, it's 11 o'clock, and maybe larger days. Increase the chance that.
Still don't know what you're saying.
Yeah, but also, no,
1 hour
I
is
think,
not enough.
no, I think actually a fixed time in the week is much better than doing it at any hour during the week.
Do it
Because
Monday.
then you'll never do it.
Oh, no. I'm saying like somebody should be on point for the day. Like there's a day that they're doing that.
I think it needs to be today because otherwise it'll be like a recurring phone call where it always sits in your calendar, even if it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You just know it's there, you get busy with other stuff. So
I'm going to take action to schedule another session.
Thanks, Dan.
Time. And I'm going to try to summarize the options so we can start a bit quicker into the next session.
Okay, so do you understand what I'm asking for? I'd like to see a schedule that has like every weekday. There's like roughly 20 weekdays in a month, right? So for weekday 1 to 20, I'd like to see 2 Ubuntu developers who are signed up to spend that day just doing review. Then we have to trust that varies, right, that people get over their inhibitions about reviewing things.
I had that thought in mind. That's not my thinking, but like,
If you just tell everyone to spend.
we sat down and talked to the